Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode. This is the Blue Stable Podcast. I am Marcus. Appreciate you guys for returning. This is the preview video of the New York Jets versus the Indianapolis Colts. Of course, the Colts is on the road this game. I'm not alone. I got my guys with me, landing in the Colts film room. Colts film room, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Doing well. Doing well. A lot of big news has happened since the last time I've been on the show, so we have a lot to talk about. I'm always an episode late every time there's Anthony Richardson news. So now that it's digested, we can really sit down and talk about it.
Almost ringing. Sorry, we're going to get all into that, but Landon, how we doing?
I'm doing great. I'm tired. I've had like a long week of work. I've been working constantly. Literally, right before we hopped on, I just walked in the door. I literally walked in the door, went straight to the computer. But other than that, I'm doing great. Kentucky got a big win over Duke. Anthony Richardson's the starter again. What else is there? This is awesome. This has been a great week for me personally.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now that you guys are here, we got to talk Jets and Colts. But before we get into that, the Colts dropped some big news, and I got to go over the injury report as well. The Colts dropped the news earlier this week that the Colts are now going back to Anthony Richardson to start at quarterback. So going into this game, he's going to be the quarterback to go to the future, which is an interesting situation after this whole season. It was just chaotic with the Joe Flacco situation, having him start at quarterback, talking about we're competing to make the playoffs, and then he stinks, and then they go back to Richardson, and then all these speculations come out. I just want to get your guys' honest thoughts about the situation. Of course, Coach Rimmer wasn't here, and last week the offense was just an abysmal performance. Flacco, pick six, fumbled, 2 interceptions, chaotic. And then Richardson goes back to starters. So I need to get your honest thoughts on Flacco's performance, and then the Colts going back to Richardson.
Well, yeah. Listen, you can't turn the ball over that many times. There were some really bad turnovers, and I think through all this, I think the one thing that you can really count on is listen, there's been a lot of smoke through the media. There's been a lot of smoke. Just rumor mill, all this really perplexing decision. The one thing I think you can certainly count on is that Shane Steichen's watching the same film that we're all watching. That's not changing. And I think there were some really bad interceptions, some poor decisions. And really, you sacrificed a lot in the run game. So I think definitely tough. Definitely a game that I think you felt like if you had something different at quarterback, and it's kind of been the story of the Colts for a while, you win that game. The defense played really, really well. I've talked about that ad nauseum. They still have a lot more room to improve. This defense isn't perfect either, but it's a defense that you really feel like for the past month could compete. As for Anthony Richardson, very perplexing decision. I've gone back and forth on my opinions multiple times, and you're trying to piece together the puzzle that no one can seem to figure out. And I think I still will probably be one of the people that thinks the tap out is certainly a factor in all of this. And I think the Colts were very careful in not wanting to promise that job immediately back to Anthony Richardson. He had to earn it back. Do I think in 14 days you've done what it takes to earn it back? Probably not. Do I think we're going to get a really reinvented Anthony Richardson in 14 days? No. Do I think that it's going to be as bad as it has been? You would really hope not. If the preparation was the factor in a lot of this, you would hope that you see potentially a different product out there on Sundays. I think the from an X's and O's pure perspective, I think you can just what you're going to see on the field is going to be way more exciting. I think what we saw with Joe Flacco is traditional drop back stuff and some run game, and it was very stale. I still thought Shane called a pretty good game in Buffalo, but it just wasn't clicking at all. They couldn't get into the red zone versus Minnesota. Had a lot of the same problems again versus Buffalo, but the turnovers became even more of a factor. And it was just forcing windows, and it just wasn't good all around. So I'm excited to see Anthony Richardson obviously back in this offense. Glad for this whole spiral to be over, and really ready to just move forward ultimately.
Before I get Landon's thoughts, of course, I got to mention as well, before Richardson got named the starter, the situation before that, players are speaking out, the Ryan Kellys and Kenny Moores. Kenny Moore even mentioned how some players are less prepared than others, and it shows on the field, and then Gus Bradley backed that situation. What was your thoughts on players speaking about, the performances of the team, how poorly they've been playing?
I think like us as a social media world, society, whatever you want to call it, we're so quick to jump on that. Like, oh, what are the Colts doing over there? Like, oh, man, no one's paying attention. I loved it, to be honest with you. You try and keep a lot of those things in-house as an NFL team as you can. But listen, after a loss like that, I mean, Kenny Moore has a right to be frustrated if he doesn't think what's happening is translating to the field, because football is the ultimate team sport. It's literally impossible for one player to carry a team. If you're a quarterback, you make the craziest play of all time. If the receiver can't catch the ball, he can't catch the ball. If you're a running back and your offensive line can't block a single person, I mean, maybe you get 5 yards, but you're not going to be able to put a whole team on your back. So, and obviously there's billions of other examples, but like, if you don't like what you hear, say something. And I think that that's the kind of message that potentially you would love this Colts team to take from. And he wasn't the only one. I think that that's the case where, like, it's very easy to say, oh, there's no culture. Oh, we jump on stuff because we expect football players to be robots, where like all they do is watch film and work out and then play football. That's just not the case. Like, there's a human element to it too. So I think I love the comments from Kenny Moore. I think if you're going to be a captain and leader of this team, those are the things you have to say. And hopefully that's the wake-up call to the individuals that they were referring to. But maybe he wasn't even referring to an individual. Maybe it's just a collective group where they're out there just not happy. It's one person one day, it's another person the next. So, yeah, I'm really obviously, I think from a public perspective, it's very easy to criticize those type of things. I was not one of them, because I think that those are the type of comments that you want from your leaders in a moment like that, instead of letting it happen and trying to keep it between,
Absolutely. Man, look, it's a new day. We get the developmental Richardson back to see how he develops throughout the season, which was the original plan anyway. But it's good to see that he's back at the starting position, especially after the whole trust in Flacco scenario. It didn't work out. So they went back to Richardson. Landon, they got Richardson back at the quarterback position. Of course, your thought process, I need to know, how are we feeling about Richardson coming back to playing QB?
Well, I mean, like, you feel good about it. I mean, you're never going to feel bad to get your developmental quarterback back in the game. Like, let's not mince words either. Like, he's probably the most single talented player on the roster. Like, I mean, you're talking about just pure talent. He's just insanely talented. And so just having that element is going to open things back up. And, whether it's, the deep ball, the running game, all that kind of stuff, like that stuff's going to be available now when it wasn't previously the last couple of weeks. Now, when it comes to like the preparation side and the kind of the stuff that we spoke about on Tuesday, do I think that you just magically fix that stuff overnight? No. And like I kind of tweeted that out the other day, like really, like there's no, like all this talk about like the process, like we have a process, we have a plan, like all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't really think that's the case. I think things are because like, here's the thing is like, if this was your plan, right, this was your process. If Joe Flacco is playing good football and they're winning games, are they going back to Anthony Richardson? No, they're not.
I mean, if you look like Joe, if he looked like Joe Montana, like
yeah. So I mean, is this your process? Is this part of your process? I mean, there's no process. I mean, that's a buzzword. Like,
so here's I wouldn't totally rule out like a Mike Tomlin situation where the team was winning games, but Justin Fields was like maybe not looking like Patrick Mahomes out there, but they were still playing pretty well. And then they would have made the switch if that's what I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there. But yeah, if Joe Flacco came in and looked like Joe Montana and threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, like, sorry, Anthony Richardson, you're not getting your job back.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is what it is. I'm glad he's back out there. I thought this was a really good, like, learning moment. And kind of like what we said Tuesday, where, and this is really like my whole problem with the whole thing, right? Is the kids he played what, 12, 13 games in college with Billy Napier as his head coach. It's not like he's benefiting from, Nick Saban like Bryce Young had, these are like really professionally ran like Ohio State is a really professionally run organization. College, not organization. Alabama, really professionally legit, like NFL environment program. Florida was not that. Florida's still not that. So him coming in, you don't know what you don't know. We said it Tuesday. And so I don't really put a lot of this on him because from all accounts, he's a great worker. He wants to be great. He just doesn't know the level of what it takes to be an NFL quarterback. And so maybe this was eye-opening. It sounds like it is. Maybe now he kind of understands, like, hey, I got to put a little bit more in than everybody else just because of the position that I am in. Not only just as a quarterback in general, but as a leader of a franchise. Like, people will feed off of me. My whole problem with this is, why is this being addressed in November of year 2? This should have been taken care of. The standard for what they're setting now for him, which is the correct standard, but the standard for what they're setting now, this should have been day 1. This stuff should have happened day 1. He set foot in the organization. This is the standard we're holding you to. This is what we expect. This is what you have to do to be successful in this league. He should have known this. He should not be learning this year 2. And so that's where my big indictment is it's not really on Richardson. I don't even have a problem with the way Shane handled it as far as the press conferences and flipping back and forth. I thought a lot of it, it just kind of is what it is.
So here's the question that I'm going to pose. Are we really buying that Shane Steichen, who preaches accountability, 2023 was all about accountability? That he just decided in November that Anthony Richardson wasn't doing it enough and he was just letting it go? Are we really buying that that's what it was, and the tap out potentially was just the last straw? Because by
all accounts, yes.
I just find it hard.
By all accounts, yes.
I find it hard to believe that an NFL team would their starting quarterback every week, he wasn't doing enough going out there on Sundays, and then this wasn't addressed to him week 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we got all the way to whatever long. They were telling us. Jonathan Taylor had an interview over the summer with Kay Adams and said all Anthony Richardson does is in his iPad. Like, I just find it hard to believe that it's, if you were to go back and look at things, that they got to this point without something else being a factor. That's
I'm not saying like there's nothing else that was a factor in it, but even now, like, you read like the Holder article today where they're saying like now he has a full grasp to where now he's coming in at 5:30 a.m. instead of maybe 7 a.m. He's coming in 2 hours earlier, staying a little bit later, doing a little bit extra work. That's all stuff that they are saying is new, that he is improving on, that is the standard now. Why was that not taught to be the standard before? That's my question. That's where I'm at.
And that's fair. I'm just not saying I'm just not buying that
I'm not saying they didn't have standards for him, but it's not.
But I will say this:
it's not just the tap out in a vacuum that caused this. It's like it's just not. Like, it's not the one single thing. So there's other things at play here, and clearly, like you've always said, is like Shane's watching the same film as we are. There's no way that you're watching that Houston game and you're coming away like what he's doing on the field is the reason why we're benching him, because he wasn't even playing bad. I mean, like, it's not great. Like, I'm not going to sit up here and like blow smoke up his ass. Like,
Well, like,
it's not like you're playing at like an all pro, like great level. It's still, he's not doing enough on the field, but it's not like it's a microcosm of just like the single, like the tap out's the reason. So there are other things at play here. And my question is if those things have improved so much in the last 2 weeks that like now you're now starting him for the rest of the season. We've seen enough growth, right? We've seen enough progress in what we wanted him to progress in the last 2 weeks that now we feel more comfortable with him moving forward, that he's our starter for the rest of the season. Why was this stuff not addressed until now? And I'm not saying it was never addressed, but that's my biggest question. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. Like I said, I don't have a problem with the way Shane handled stuff in the media. I thought, for fans and all that, like it wasn't going to be. It left a lot up for interpretation from fans and media. And whenever all that happens, people are allowed to run with all these crazy ideas of, well, see, he doesn't prepare. He's not a great worker. He's not a good person behind the scenes. Like, I've seen those posts. That's all bullshit. It is. Sorry for cursing. Sorry. But it's BS. And yeah, like he's a great person. He does prepare. He does want to be great. I feel like I'm going on a monologue again. It's the exact same monologue I went on Tuesday. But at the end of the day, they thought that what he was doing behind the scenes wasn't enough as far as preparation, as far as being on, maybe you're 3 minutes late to a meeting, right? Just something like that. And maybe that signals to other guys, well, if my franchise quarterback and my player is 3 minutes late to a meeting, then I can afford to be 3 minutes late to a meeting. And then that's a trickle-down effect. And I just don't think that he understood, because of how young he is, the gravity of the situation that has been placed upon him, which is fine. I mean, he's a kid. He doesn't know. And so I think now they're saying, like, this is the stuff we wanted him to improve on. He's improving on it. Let's go. This was the process. And I don't buy it.
I'm not buying any of it.
I don't buy it. Yeah,
I'm not buying, and I mean this with all respect to everyone involved. If I'm not supposed to believe anything at the press conferences because they save face and do whatever they need to do to keep things in house. Yeah, why should I believe that they're going to leak things to reporters instead? Why should I believe that if they're not going to do it themselves? So instead of controlling the narrative themselves, they're just going to go through a reporter to like. That's the thing about the situation that I don't think you can. That's what I'm saying is all that stuff was your interpretation, because there is no facts. There's really very little facts in the matter. Yeah, I agree that they allowed that speculation to happen, and that's that's kind of my disagreement. Is like, hey, you could have gotten up there and said, hey, listen, well, we're going to go ahead and bench Anthony. It's going to take this time for him to reset. We're going to reevaluate things week to week, and we will see where we go from there. We think Joe is a really good quarterback and can help us win games. But this is about Anthony needing to learn to reset or however you want to go about it. And then people can be like, okay, Anthony Richardson needs to reset. The tap out, that was clearly a factor. The on-field play clearly wasn't getting any better. But the dodging of questions, all the kind of stuff, invited everybody and their mother to say whatever they wanted to say. And that's where it wasn't. I don't think it was handled publicly. I don't think that's really much up for debate. Whether it's important for them to handle it publicly is another thing. At the end of the day, the 53 guys in the raw, how it's handled in that locker room matters more than what I think. Then who cares what I think? Like, they sure don't. If you're in that locker room and you're going to war with Anthony Richardson, that's who they care about. So, and from all accounts, from what you hear from the players, that was handled correctly. And that's all that I think that's what matters more than what any of us on this show really think about the situation.
Amen. I agree 100%. Hey, you guys both agreed on the same thing without going back and forth. It's just
exactly. This is so typical of us. We like talk in circles. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing, just in different ways.
Yeah. That was great.
Same thing, but just different font. Like we're just in a different font.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Hey, man, we got a week ahead. We got a game ahead of us. If you guys didn't forget, we got to play New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Brees Hall, Sauce Gardner. A lot of talent on that team. But we got to go over the injury report before we go into detail about the game. So for the Indianapolis Colts, I got it listed here. DeForest Buckner is active. Bernard Ryman is out, as listed earlier, with the knee injury. He will not be playing. EJ Speed is questionable. I'm a Grant Stewart fan, so you know where I'm going with that situation. Julian Blackman's active. Michael Pittman Jr. is back. He's fully available. Braden Smith, he did not practice, but he's available, and Grover Stewart's available as well. Just to go brief over the offense, we can talk about it now. 3 rookies on the offensive line going up against this New York Jets defense going into this week. Could raise a lot of questions, but I think we've seen some progressions out of these rookies like Macklin Salves and that nature. They played pretty well so far, so this is going to be a big test for them going up against this New York Jets team. Of course, the Jets have not had the best season so far, but you cannot count them out, especially when you're going up against the Indianapolis Colts, because the Cardiac Colts love to just have a roller coaster of emotion for fans week in and week out. But this offensive line, like I said, has 3 rookies going into this week. Landon, what's your thoughts about the offensive line?
Yeah, well, I mean, like this is another tough test. Like regardless, like throw the records out, right? Whenever you're looking at these 2 teams, just throw the records out. The New York Jets, while it hasn't always translated on the field as far as success goes and in the win-loss record, they have a lot of talent. Like they are a very talented team. They are not just on defense, they're talented on offense. Like they have players that can make you pay for making mistakes. Most notably, it's their defensive line on their defense, right? They have a very, very strong pass rush with these guys in there. So, yeah, this is going to be a big test. We saw them struggle in pass protection a little bit last week, but with Anthony Richardson being back, this is another one of like the small little details that a lot of times gets overlooked. Is they're not going to be able just to tee off on Anthony Richardson the same way that they were able to tee off against Joe Flacco. They have to stay more disciplined in their gaps. They have to stay more disciplined as far as setting the edge and not allowing him to escape the pocket. These are all things. Now they have to think, right? With Joe Flacco back there, you could just go. You could just rush the passer. You don't have to worry about him making plays outside of the pocket, unless you want to count like one long run from about a month ago. He'll still beat you there occasionally, but now like all those advantages are gone, right? So that should help out the offensive line. That should help out the rookies. Tanner Bornolini has been fantastic once again. He had a great game last week, probably outside of really Nelson. He's probably their best offensive lineman. Dalton Tucker's continued to play strong. Gonsalves struggled a little bit in pass pro last week, but in the run game, he's been strong. So, and regardless, last week they did have like a very good run blocking game as far as getting push up front. I thought they did a really good job. Where they struggled was in pass pro, but this is another great matchup, another great opportunity for those guys to learn and get the reps, which they clearly need. And I think really like that's where this team should be at right now, is about developing and getting reps.
That is so not what you said at the beginning of the year when I was like, this season is finding out what you had about AR, and you're like, no, this season's about winning. Now we're talking about developing players.
Well, that's because that's what they told us.
That's true. That's fair.
That's
what no, Ballard in week 1 said we'd be in the mix. That means a lot of things.
Yeah, that's I went off of the basis of that is what they told us, is now it is time to win. Now we are being competitive. Now, blah, 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 blah. They didn't do that. So once again, like we said the last time we were on the show, we have more information now at our disposal. So now we can make different
Agreed.
things.
So
I think now being where they are, I think they need to get these guys reps, and I think they need to play, and they've played really well. So I'm excited to see how they match up. This is a strong defensive line. Got some really talented players along it, but now with Anthony Richardson back there, that is probably the one area where you have seen it translate from college, and you have seen it done at a high level, is his sack avoidance and his ability to make rushers miss and his ability to help out the offensive line. That's undoubtedly been probably the best part of his entire game. And that's he's really strong at. So, yeah, having him back should help.
So I think this season is the ultimate just proving or ultimate example, the epitome of how you can never invest too many resources into the trenches because, and I know, listen, I get it. It sounds like I'm just hyping up Chris Ballard and boosting him because that's what he believes. But that's the one thing I love about him. I'm not saying I love everything about him, but that's the one thing I do because we're at a point in the season now where like you're going to get injured up front at some point. You just are. Now the Colts are a little bit injured on the offensive line than they would like to be, but we're at the point where their 4th round pick from 2 years ago can't even see the field. Blake Freeland, he can't even get dressed for the game because they have the depth in that room. So I think that's really important in where they're at because I think you feel now has this unit been perfect? No, I actually probably lean. I'm probably a little bit more harsher of a critic. I didn't think they were that great in the run game as well as pass pro. I think there's a lot of things to clean up in that regard. But I do agree with Landon making a great point is that when you get Anthony Richardson on the field, they rush you differently. It's harder to sack them. That just is. And that helps your offensive line in a lot of capacity. Now, I'd love to see them bring the RPO game when you get this is the one thing I think is interesting about this matchup from a front perspective is these two teams practiced against each other all season, basically. The Colts and the Jets run a very similar scheme, wide 9 defense, a lot of over front cover 3 stuff. And a lot of what works against that and what Shane has been successful in that area is the RPO game. So I think we're going to see a little bit of that. I think we're going to see some more things that gets the ball out of hand, Anthony Richardson's hands quicker than potentially it has been because you're right. This is a really talented unit up front. Hassan Reddick, Quinnen Williams, Will McDonald's been fantastic in his second year. And they're just really deep in that area. And then they're good. They're basically good all around. Like it's almost perplexing where the Jets are because you look at this roster and you're like, wow, this is not a bad roster.
Well, I think they have had, so they've got the talent, right? But for some reason it hasn't translated as far as on-field success in the secondary. That's really where they've been really vulnerable at. And that's kind of crazy considering you have one of the most talented DBs. And really going into this year, a lot of people would say the best DB in football, either him or, PS2 or Jalen Ramsey, up there with those guys. And Sauce, for some reason, because cornerback is so volatile. I know we've talked about it before on the show. It's such a volatile position year over year where 1 minute you're the GOAT, the next minute, you're the lamb going into the slaughterhouse. And that's really kind of where like Sauce Gardner's been this year is he's been penalized so many times as far as defensive pass interference and holding. They've really kind of struggled along that back end. So that's kind of been their downfall. But even then, with Robert Saleh as head coach before he was let go, they were still performing at like a very, very high level defensively. So it's not going to be a walk in the park for sure. And we'll talk more about the offense in whole, but just pointing that out about the offensive line.
Oh yeah, 100%. And Jets fans, if you are watching, I did not forget you guys' injury report. I do have it pulled up here. We just had to get our thoughts on our rookies, so cut us some slack. But the Jets injury report, they have 3 players out and 2 players questionable. The questionable, we feel like they're going to play anyway. But the players that are out, offensive lineman Jake Hansen, C.J. Mosley, Tyron Smith. The questionable players is Devontae Adams and Solomon Thomas. But they got a lot of players coming back this game, even from injury report. They're going to be active. It's football, contact sport. Michael Carter II, Chuck Clark, Brandon Echols, Morgan Moses, DJ Reed, Rogers, Shaz Sherrod, Elijah Vera Tucker, guy who I wanted in the draft, but all those guys. But like I said, 3 players out, 2 players questionable. Going into this game, we can go ahead and hop into the details about the situation, offense and defense. Of course, we got to start with the offensive side. The offense last week, of course, the motor, Jonathan Taylor, had a good start. Going into the second half, late into the fourth, they went away from it and pretty much the offense just fell flat. Of course, it had signs of life after the debacle performances of the first opening drive, and then the 2 drives after that, well, 3 drives. So, of course, you bring it back Richardson. Shane Steichen game plan has to be on a tee moving forward. I feel like it's going to be different. Is it going to be 2023 Richardson? Probably not. But hopefully we can see some type of growth and development. So I want to get you guys' mindset of how you think Shane Steichen should approach this game against this Jets defense. We can start with Colts Film Room first.
No, I want to hear Landon's thoughts first.
You're just trying to argue, aren't you?
This is great.
It's Friday.
It's Friday.
My first Friday show.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, here's the thing with Richardson coming back, right? And he's in 14 days, he's had this great epiphany, right? And now the preparation is where it needs to be. And all, everything's spirit fingers, everybody's happy, everybody's good. None of that matters if you continue to call the offense that you called for the majority of the season. None of it matters. Because if you're going to continue to ask him to throw the ball 35 times a game, a lot of low completion passes, a lot of deep, 15-yard dig routes to Pittman and these bombs to Alec Pierce and getting away from Jonathan Taylor, like none of it's going to matter what kind of progress Richardson's made if you're still continuing to ask your quarterback to complete these really low percentage, inefficient plays. It's not. So hopefully in that same time, Shane Steichen's had an epiphany of working and figuring out a way to mold this really more around Anthony Richardson's strengths. As far as I would love to see more quarterback run game. I would love to see not giving Jonathan Taylor 5 carries in the second half. That would be really cool. I think a lot of RPO elements, which Colts Film Room kind of pointed to earlier, I think that would be a really effective way because he had a lot of success on those last year, especially if you go back and watch like the Rams game and some of the other games he played well in. I think really just simplifying things, right? Like just making it to where, he doesn't have to think as much because he's still growing into that. And we've seen it now to where, he's going through, this was a real complex quarterback NFL offense that they were running. And where you're getting through your 3 progressions and throwing the ball with anticipation and stuff like that. And that's where we saw him struggle because he's just not there yet mentally and that kind of stuff. So I think kind of maybe just dialing things back a little bit, making it RPO to where, you just have the one read, or the quarterback run game where you just have the one read. Yeah. Just like KISS, right? Is what we all learned in school. Like the acronym KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Just keep it simple. And kind of allow him, maybe, I don't know if they got the horses to do this, but maybe throw in some tight end screens.
I like that.
To Granson. Like maybe throw in, more like Josh Downs, more of these one read. I know you hate Hank, but I do think there is a little bit of beneficial. There is a little bit of benefit.
No way I joined that show, and that's
this is great.
So
no way you're calling for Hank. There's so many better things than Hank.
I'm not saying there's not better things, but I think I'm
gonna pretend you didn't say Hank and you say quick game.
What? What'd you say?
Pretend you didn't say Hank and you say quick game.
Yeah. So, but I'm saying like maybe there's a way just to make things more simple to where, if he doesn't have to get to his 4th read in a progression and throw with anticipation, because that's clearly where he has been struggling at. It seems like he's just a tick late mentally, and unless a guy is just flashing wide open, he's kind of hesitating to. We've seen a couple times where like he's going to throw and he kind of second guesses and pulls it back a little bit and then throws, and then it's late, and that leads to pass breakups, or worst case scenario, it leads to interceptions. So just yeah, just try to help your quarterback out a little bit. That's what I was saying is like, regardless of what great strides Anthony Richardson has made, that all of a sudden now this is now the new process. This is the third process in the last 2 weeks. So now this is the process. So none of that matters if you continue to do the same things that weren't working for the first 6 weeks he was playing.
I agree with that. And I think the Jonathan Taylor situation is a little bit perplexing as well. I've said that word multiple times, but I kind of mean it. Where fans always seem to get really frustrated when Shane doesn't go to Jonathan Taylor all the time. I think some situations are warranted. I think other ones, we can just, like, I think to that Green Bay game, I'm like, listen, Jonathan Taylor is one of the best pure runners of the football. The running back position, and here's what I think I find so interesting, and why maybe I've overlooked Jonathan Taylor in the past. Not saying that he was ever a bad player, but that his impact in the offense would be diminished, is because he is so good of a runner of the football that it makes the fact that he's not a great pass protector or a pass catcher irrelevant. That's really what it is. To me, Jonathan Taylor is not a guy that I want their pass block. I want Trey Sermon. I don't want, and I know he's dropped a bunch of balls, so it's hard for me to say this now, but I want Tyler Goodson running routes. I don't want Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor can get a screen, and he can he's electric with the ball in his hands. He's a great pure runner of the football. But I think there's some times where, like, you're down in the fourth, and, like, listen, Jonathan Taylor is the ice when you're up and you have a lead. This Colts team, when they don't have a lead in the fourth, tend to dip away from Jonathan Taylor. And I don't necessarily hate that. That's just kind of how it is.
But here, so here is the only rebuttal I have, right, with that, is by taking Jonathan Taylor off the field, right, and you're going to Trey Sermon or you're going to Tyler Goodson, is the defense worried at all? Like, are you worried about Trey Sermon being on the field? Do you have to think when Trey Sermon's on the field, as a defensive coordinator, are you saying, okay, like, now Trey Sermon's on the field, now we have to worry about pass pro, we have to worry about the passing game, we have to worry about, but when you're
down, what were they down in the fourth quarter? Someone tell me. It was more than a score.
I mean, late it was more of a score, but going into the third, like in the third quarter, they were only down by a touchdown.
So
it was 13 to 20 to 13.
One second. So we can talk the Buffalo game, and then we can talk some of the other times that this has came up, like the Green Bay game. The Green Bay game, I was fully on board. I was like, what are we talking about? There's no reason to push on the Taylor. I understand the sentiment from the Buffalo game for sure. The other thing I would tell you is that when Ryman went down, you had three. They weren't running the ball well. Like, and yes, you can be, what do you call it? Persistent in how you want to do that, so you can continue to run the ball despite not doing it well. But what they were getting a little bit of explosives late in the game with Anthony Richardson and Alec Pierce. So I think that's the route they went. I don't necessarily always hate it. I think it's very revisionist history sometimes to look at it that way. But for the most part, I don't think the defense – they would much rather the defense knows, hey, if they run the ball, like I'm more thinking pass than Jonathan Taylor and then the Colts having to deal with Jonathan Taylor potentially missing an assignment and resulting in a sack. So they would rather keep the quarterback clean or Goodson run a good route when they do that. Like, they don't run the routes very often. They like, when Goodson's in the game, it's not like a huge route tree, I should say. So
yeah, I would like to see, like, if Jonathan Taylor's not going to be on the field, and I think too, like, that I still think you're discounting a little bit Jonathan Taylor, because he is one of those guys, like, even if it is a passing situation, if he gets the ball, he's still one of those guys that on any given play, it doesn't matter if it's a run play, it doesn't matter if it's a screen, he can take the ball 60 yards to the house on any given play. Like that, if it's 2nd and 10 and you run a draw play, theoretically, yes, that's a terrible call, but he's one of the very few guys in the league that, like, he can turn that into a 50-yard touchdown. Like, the element of them the defense still being terrified of that guy having the ball in his hands is still there. So that's just like my point of view on it. But
I agree. I wish.
I think Tyler Goodson does need to get more run on this team. Like he needs to be playing significantly more snaps than Trey Sermon.
Yeah, so a couple things. One, I think you go into next year, and I think the needs for the Colts are starting to reveal themselves. I think having a second running back is something that they've needed. Like when Jonathan Taylor was running, they had Naeem Hines.
I mean, we said it in the offseason.
Look at what Detroit does with their two lead backs. Look what Philadelphia did a couple of years ago with LeGarrette Blount and that just the workhorse. Back. They don't have the workhorse back necessarily. I'm a big believer of having multiple for that reason. So I think that's a need ultimately. I do agree with you to a degree. I agree with you to an extent. I think there's some times where Jonathan Taylor hasn't earned a spot on the field. You would love him to be more well-rounded, but just because he's a good runner doesn't mean he deserves to be on the field on a pass play when you have better options in that scenario. That's my opinion. But I do understand the sentiment of like, hey, if he's now here's the one thing I will say. It doesn't matter who the running back is. If Anthony Richardson's out there, then they have to start thinking run pass every play. Unless situation.
Well, that's if that's if they're calling them though. Like if you're not building up to that moment, I mean it's
if Anthony Richardson,
if you're continuing to make him a drop back passer standing in the pocket 35, 40 passes a game, then I think you're kind of doing a big disservice. And like that's my only thing with Richardson being back, too, is like everybody's so worried now. Because now like the only concern for me is like health, right? Like, I mean, if they're going to go back to a simpler offense and more quarterback run, more playing to what he does well, that should be the only question now is health. So outside of that, I mean, like it should be wheels up. Like it's wheels up now.
I think we'll have a lot more to say after the game as opposed to now. I think we're talking services.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of where like I'm excited to see what this offense. I'd love to see a 2023 offense.
Yeah.
I'd love to see guys involved. Ultimately, I'd love to see them in a situation they were in Pittsburgh when they had the lead and then they can just run the ball. And that's what this offense is built to do. Now, they're going to have to get healthy in a lot of spots. I think you'd love to find a better answer at tackle and guard while these guys are developing. That's just not the reality of the NFL. Like these guys need to play because for me, Gonzalez is the type of guy that you drafted high enough to be an ultimate starter on your roster at some capacity. You've already told us multiple times that he is better. You basically told us the entire season he's better than Blake Freeland. Blake Freeland can't get on the field right now, which is a good thing. But that offensive line will need to be returned to their dominant form that they were earlier in this season with Anthony Richardson and at their peak. So for this team to make the run that they want to run. And this offense,
and like I'll say this too, like when you speak about getting healthier, I think even with Pittman practicing in full this week, I still think AD Mitchell needs to be on the field more. Like you can't go back to him playing 6 snaps just because Pittman is now.
So the six. So I was the biggest person to complain about the 6 snaps. Now they went a lot of 12 personnel in that game, and that's what they do against blitz heavy teams. Like that's just what they do. So that's why ultimately you take about his limited 11 personnel snaps, and that becomes even less with 12 personnel. He's got to play more. He's too good. He's too good not to. And you have to keep guys fresh. And I think that like that's the whole deal with Pittman. Like Pittman's the type of guy that I think like he's a fiery guy. I think more behind the scenes than maybe out front because obviously he was playing through this insane injury, but is such a relaxed guy in media settings. And I think
he's a dog.
He is. And I love that he was fighting through it. He got to a point where like, listen, AD Mitchell just can't be on the sidelines. You're not winning games with him out there. And he had a really good game versus Buffalo. And I think he has a chance to continue to build on it. But you can't like if his rookie season can't end like this because with him decreasing snap, we need to increase those snaps. I think Reggie Wayne came out and said that needs to be the case. I also think it's easier said than done because on rundowns, you want Alec Pierce. Like AD Mitchell is still not a very good run blocker. That's just That's the life of it. Wasn't good in college, isn't good now. Alec Pierce is going to get the snaps over him in those settings. Pittman ultimately is your $70 million guy that's played like a $10 million guy this year, for being honest with each other on this call. I think Pittman would probably say he hasn't been happy with the season that he wanted to have. Probably due to injury, probably due to performance. Have to get him involved in some capacity. It's a tough formula, but I think that you have to be able to find a way to rotate those guys and get more plays for AD, because when you go 3-by-1 and he's the individual back, there's not a guy who can cover him. He separates.
Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is, like, you can't, now that this is, so now, like, you theoretically, like, I know we've said this, like I said, there's been like multiple processes in the last 3 weeks. But theoretically now, this is where you're at moving forward, right? You're moving forward with Richardson. You're moving forward with the, Bordellini, at least for the foreseeable future right now, because Kelly's out, just had surgery. Dalton Tucker, you're moving forward with him. You can't go back, right? And that's my biggest worry, is what I was saying is, like, yeah, like Richardson's shown all this promise, in the last 2 weeks where he's grown exponentially. Like, it can't just be that guy that's learned a valuable lesson. Like, your coach has got to learn too. And I just don't know how you can watch AD Mitchell play last week and now relegate him to the role that he had previously. You got to get him on the field more. Jonathan Taylor, you got to get him more involved throughout the entire game, not just in one half and, a setting like that. Richardson, you got to simplify stuff. So this is going to be like a big game, like he was saying. Like, I know we're talking about it a little bit early, because we don't know at the moment. But, this is going to be a big moment for Shane, because if Shane goes out there and is using the same rotations he was using 4 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, the same play calls he was using 2 weeks ago, the same formula with JT that we saw in the Buffalo game, like, if he hasn't learned anything, which I think he's smart enough, theoretically, he's way
I don't think
smarter.
you go back. I don't think you go back to Richardson and just say and just do the same thing. Now,
Exactly.
I won't. And I'm saying this right to this group now. If the performance doesn't look bad, I'm not one to jump on a play caller. Like, I can jump on individual play calls and play designs within the context.
I don't think he's not a bad.
I don't think I can do that until I watch the film. So, like, it might look very bad, and everyone's like, "Oh, Shane doing the same thing." Yeah, and he's throwing it deep. He's not giving him easy stuff, and like, I won't make that decision until I watch the film. But I do think that he's not stupid enough to make that. I have hope that he's not stupid enough to make mistakes twice.
Yeah, that's my thing. And really, like, majority of this year, like, I haven't really had too much of an issue with kind of like what he's calling out there, just based off the looks they're being given. But at some point, you can't let the defense dictate what you call. You have to dictate what the defense does.
He's had 3. Like, I thought last year the Buccaneers game stood out to me, the Cleveland game stood out to me, the Rams game, I think, was
I would say the
maybe both Houston games as well. He's called good games against Houston, hasn't resulted in wins, but he's called really good games against them. Here, I think you can point to a couple, but there's a lot of stinkers that there weren't last year.
A lot of it too, and like I said this Tuesday as well, because we were going through the Flacco thing and all this, and once again, I said Flacco didn't play well. He's not good. It's not good enough. But I'm just giving Ben shit. But what I was telling him, because he was asking about Shane Steichen's play calling, and I'm like, look, dude, it doesn't matter what you call. If guys aren't out there executing and like your quarterback's turning the ball over, and Anthony Richardson's like, if Anthony Richardson goes out this week and he's missing all kinds of open throws, and which is entirely, I mean, that's at this point maybe even a probability more than a possibility. But if your guys aren't executing on the field, it doesn't matter what you're calling. It doesn't matter what your play calls are. It doesn't matter. You could call like the greatest play of all time, and if your wide receiver isn't making his
like Josh Downs on the 1 yard line.
Yeah, I mean, like it doesn't matter what you're calling if guys aren't executing. So I think there needs to be growth, not just from the quarterback. I think there needs to be growth from the head coach. There needs to be growth from the wide receivers. It needs to be like everybody. You don't go 4-6 based off of just one player, right? So
Yeah.
That's true, man. 100% agree. I agree. They got
I
to go
think
out there and execute.
before we end it, we should probably just talk real quick about stopping Rodgers, stopping Garrett Wilson, stopping.
Oh yeah, that was my next segment. I was about to go into that.
Oh, sorry, I just stole your
hey, look,
Yeah, I can't leave the defense. That's the best part. So going over to the defense, which is our favorite part. Of course, I just mentioned EJ Speed is questionable, but I'm a huge fan of Grant Stewart. Why? Because if we talk about the tackling issue, he doesn't really have that issue. So throwing Grant Stewart in there, I'll be totally fine. But going up against this Jets team, last week they totaled 200 yards, 100 passing yards, and 70 rushing yards. So I'm pretty sure they're going to try to go into this game with a little bit more polished pace. That's what you would think, especially against a Colts team like this. Gus Bradley's scheme been playing phenomenal all year, in my opinion. Kudos, give a hat off to him. Going up against Rodgers and Devontae Adams.
But
yeah, I say he gotten better like over the season. So I would say that's pretty much the bread and butter of this team in general is the defense. So going up against Rodgers and Devontae Adams, Rodgers pretty much in the same position as Flacco, seeing every defense known to mankind. Just got to go out there and play good football. So Gus Bradley's mindset going into this game, I'm pretty sure he's been having a heck of a stretch right now. It's probably going to continue, hopefully. But like I said, this Jets team is coming off of a last week performing against the Cardinals to average 3.8 yards per play. So like I said, this defense has a chance to go out there and keep the engine going. And if the offense finds a little bit of life, maybe the defense won't be on the field as much as possible. But what's your thoughts, Coach Film Room, about this defense going up against Rodgers, who's haven't been having a good year, but can still have a good game in general?
Yeah, just to keep it quick since we're going long, I think that Rodgers can always punish you. You can't overlook that, no doubt about it. It's struggled and it hasn't worked the same way. I think this is going to start with the defensive line. Like we talk about Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. If you're getting pressure on Rodgers, you can really affect it because he's not the same mobile quarterback as he is. He's playing banged up, certainly. And this offensive line has kind of been a turnstile in certain capacities. I mean, they had Olu Fashanu, who's a really, really good tackle, come in and play guard for him at one point versus Houston. So it's really going to start up front with the defensive line, and then it's going to start to trickle down into the coverage plan that Gus Bradley has. I think that whether it's doubling Garrett Wilson and clouding, I think we're going to see a lot of too high. I don't think we're going to see the cover three that we normally do because I don't think that they're, with all due respect to those guys, it's really hard to cover everyone at once. And I think the defenses that have had the most success against Aaron Rodgers has been able to limit the run with Breece Hall from too high and try and cloud and double the two receivers and getting +1 to each side of the formation with too high shells. So that's probably what I think they're going to do. This defense has gotten really good at calling at these. I mean, like the Colts are up there in cover two. People don't want to talk about that, but that's what they are. I think we're going to get to a point where hopefully the world knows that this isn't the same Gus Bradley cover three defense anymore. It's really not. It'd be unfair to categorize it as anything else.
Yeah, I agree. And like that's kind of the point I was going to make is I think there needs to be really a limit on because Aaron Rodgers, man, like when you look at what he loves to do, he loves to air it out, right? He loves to throw the deep ball to Devontae Adams. He loves to throw the deep ball to Garrett Wilson. He hates taking the check down. He's a big play hunter, but and weirdly, like he's been so efficient at that. That it's amazing he hasn't thrown more interceptions than what he has because he's just so efficient. But yeah, I think limiting explosives. That's the thing with this Colts defense, and what's kind of been really weird is even though their scoring defense has improved, they're still 29th in yards given up. So they still give up a ton of yards. So you can't continue to give Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and Breece Hall and even Braylon Allen. Like nobody's talking about Braylon Allen, like who's been running the ball like a madman. He's been fantastic.
Love
And
Braylon
then
Allen.
yeah, like Garrett Wilson, like these are still extremely talented players. That's what I said earlier in the show is like take the records out of it. This team has guys that can beat you in a variety of ways. And it's up to them to stay efficient. I think a lot of it has been Aaron Rodgers and his guys, like they haven't really been on the same page a lot. So they're missing a lot of open throws and stuff where guys are just maybe Garrett Wilson's not running the correct route, or Mike Williams, I know, like I got called out earlier this week for not running the correct route, and that led to an interception, and that's the kind of stuff. So it's really been more execution based on the New York Jets side of things, as opposed to it's been a lack of talent. And so this can't be the typical get right game that this Colts defense has been for the majority of Gus Bradley's career. Like you can't allow these guys to get right against you and come out and start executing, because they have the talent to where if they start getting into a rhythm, and we know what happens when Aaron Rodgers gets into a rhythm early, he'll start carving you up all day. And then you're looking like the Thanksgiving turkey that's going to be plated next Thursday or here in a couple weeks. And he's made a career out of doing that to guys. So I think early on, tackling, once again, is of the utmost importance. You cannot allow Breece Hall and Braylon Allen to get loose in the run game. Where they've been really vulnerable at is in pass protection. So this is a game where guys like DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, Leatu Latu, this is a game where those guys should be able to feast, and they should be able to put a lot of pressure on Aaron Rodgers and make life really hard for him. And hopefully if they can do that, I think they can continue to keep this Jets defense to where they're not on the same page, and maybe they make some mistakes. And Colts have gotten really good over the last month of capitalizing on those mistakes as far as turnovers go. So it's going to be another game, I think, where you could see some turnovers, maybe even in the way of fumbles recovered and stuff like that. But yeah, you can't let the explosives with those weapons beat you, whether that's in the run game, whether that's with those wide receivers.
Amen, man. Look, it's going to be an interesting game for both defensive lines. Like, a lot of people forget the Jets. They got a good sack rate on that defensive line, man. Williams has been dogging all year. So he's going to see them rookies on the opposite side. I know he's going to try to feast for sure. But I got a lot of faith in Bortolini, man. He's been balling all year. I remember at the beginning of the year, I was talking to Landon when Ryan Kelly first got hurt, and I was like, I mean, Bortolini's been balling, so I would rather have him start. Of course, there was a little discourse in that situation, but I seem to be right at the end of it, so I pat myself on the back.
Yeah, I mean, like it's all based off of just like if you just watch the film and like look at the numbers and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's been no doubt about it. I mean, like obviously career wise, Ryan Kelly is former Pro Bowl, like all that. We understand that. If you're strictly talking 2024, Tanner Bortolini has been the better player at center. Now, maybe like there's a lot more mental side of the game that goes into playing center that I think it's overlooked a lot. And I think that's an area where Ryan Kelly is like super elite at. He's just such a cerebral guy. And with Bortolini being a rookie, I think you are missing that aspect of the game. But as far as, if we're talking about man on man, body on body, like Bortolini's been the better option so far. So we'll just continue to see, hopefully having a guy who to me is one of the smartest players ever right next to him in Quentin Nelson. The guy's just like insanely intelligent. Hopefully that can kind of help ease that mental burden. And with Richardson being back there now, I know they were saying in the article today that we were reading that Richardson has actually been spending a few hours each day now since he's having more time in the building, right? He's able to spend more time, and he's actually been in the offensive line room with Tony Sperano Jr.
That was probably his biggest mental.
Going over more protections, going over the schemes, trying to understand the offensive line aspect of things. And so I'm really curious to see if that plays out now, because normally Ryan Kelly has been that anchor as far as calling the protections and getting guys to where they need to be. With him being out, you do lose that element of it. So with Bortolini being in there, who's another, I mean, he's extremely intelligent, we know that, but I want to see if maybe Anthony Richardson does kind of take on a bigger role as far as protections and recognizing blitzes and stuff like that, and knowing where guys should be, where they need to be.
It's going to be interesting to see, man. It's going to be an interesting game, of course. Roller coasters. You guys know me. I will definitely be on Twitter during this game because I need a good laugh to watch the emotions just flare up.
I'm just glad now that we don't have to worry about winning and losing, right?
Right.
Like, so if the Colts come out and lose the game, I don't care. These guys got reps.
I think they're
He's reps. Cool. We're now officially out of the win now.
Yes.
Process. We're not all chips in anymore. Incidentally, I think by making this move, I think it could lead to more winning. So I think it's kind of funny.
That's true.
By going out of win now, Joe Flacco, you actually might have a better chance of winning.
Explosive plays is back, baby. Let it rip. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I just want to see it. That's the bad thing. That's what sucks, right? This is what sucks. Is when the Colts went to Joe Flacco, right? Not only were you losing games,
it was boring.
Boring. Like, not only were you bad, but you were boring to watch too. It sucked. It felt like a job to watch this team on Sundays. Now, at least, if they're a bad football team, at least we'll probably get 2 or 3 plays where you're just like, holy shit, like, this is fun. So if you're gonna be bad, at least be fun.
That's all I want.
We're back. We're back. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The horseshoe is back, baby.
Jeez.
We're gonna be interested to watch this game.
Oh yeah.
So, Colts Jets, you guys tune in. Let us know your score predictions in the comments section as well. Look out for the song. I'm pretty sure Seth got a banker dropping soon. You guys stay tuned for that.
Oh, it already released today. It released today. It wasn't his best work. Wasn't his best work. I expected more, honestly. But
not you holding him to a standard.
What was the Jets thing? Hold on. It's on the tip of my tongue. The quote was, I quote, you know how he does like the little, like the team thing? It was, he said, the one true Rodgers. That was his bar.
Fan of the year.
Yeah, he got to get back.
Not even not grounding the Jets, not making them crash, nothing like that. It was
he got to get back in the booth.
Let's beat the one true Rodgers. Like, that's what you got for me this week. I expected more. So I know the good news is he'll be back in the lab next week. I think after a disappointing week, I think he'll be back in the lab. I think he'll have a new process. Hopefully he's able to put more hours in and learn a little bit more.
You guys sound like you told him the other week. Read the room.
No, this was fun. I was hyped. Like, whenever I think that's where we're at in our fandom right now. It's the fact that when Richardson got announced the starter, that was one of my first thoughts. I was like, that Colts anthem is going to be a banger this week. I literally that was like one of the first 3 thoughts I had. It was like, I can't wait to hear the anthem this week. So that's where we're at as Colts fans. Is like, that's one of the things I look forward to the most every week. Is
it's just a banger. It's a good
banger.
End the week.
The flow, baby. The flow. Fan of the year.
Now, I will say I hold Seth to a really high standard. When it was the Broncos game, he's like, show him who the real horse is. That was a banger.
Yeah, he killed it with that one.
I think there was even one like a couple weeks ago. It might have been the Houston one. And I was like, yeah, like this. Hold on, I've got it pulled up somewhere.
Do you have them saved? Someone should make an album.
He's trying to get a mixtape.
24 album. Someone should make a 24 album. Put it on Spotify.
A Seth Christmas special.
I should be Seth's marketing manager.
I don't know. He's everywhere right now.
I think he's got someone doing it better than I could. But someone should make an album.
He's everywhere. Deservedly so. That guy's been grinding for like 2 years. Like, this isn't like a just this season thing. Like, I know like it's caught on this season, He was doing this all last year too. Like it was every week last year he was doing it too, which was fine. So whenever he finally caught on, I was just like, hey, this guy deserves it. And he does. He's put in a lot of work.
No doubt.
Shout out to Seth.
Yep.
We'll be back next week to give you a reaction to the game. Hopefully it's a good one. But we will let you guys know. Follow us on all platforms. Appreciate all the support moving forward. Shout out to the 400 people that was here.
It was the Texans. He said horns down on Stroud's turf. Horns down on Stroud's turf. I was like, that's a bar. But let's beat the one true Rodgers. I was expecting. So
that ain't it.
We got to get better.
Nope.
Who's the fake Rodgers? If he's the one true Rodgers, is this like Highlander? Are there more than one? There can only be one. He's the one true Rodgers. It just confused me. So, shout out.
Please, Lord. We appreciate you guys, man. Shout out to the 400. Hopefully you followed all of us on all the platforms. Appreciate all of us. Appreciate all of you guys as well. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, 5 Eastern. We'll let you know if the schedule changes, but that is the schedule for now. That is Colts Film Room. It's Landon. It's Marcus. You guys have a good weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.